Gail Storm was a stripper for LBJ, wasn't she? I don't know who she was. I grew up on like Argosy magazine. Gail Storm was a stripper. Who's Gail Storm? Turn it off. LBJ liked this kind of thing, didn't he? Whenever Lady Bird wasn't around, he went down to booze it up down in New Orleans with the ladies.
Savage. 910 at 9:10 a.m. on 910 a.m. The new generation of talk radio is coming.
Before he spoke before Congress, Obama was at a memorial today for Walter Cronkite. You know, the man who stabbed our troops in the back in Vietnam, Cronkite. Tributes.
Walter wasn't afraid to rattle the high and the mighty, but he never dared compromise his integrity. He got along with elected officials even if they were wary of one another's motives. One politician once remarked, "Walter, my friend, you've got to believe me fully. 85% of everything I told you today is the absolute truth."
Yes, he was a perfect member of the government media complex, but the saccharine sweetness kept on flowing.
Through all the events that came to define the 20th century, through all our moments of deepest hurt and brightest hope, Walter Cronkite was there, telling the story of the American age. And this is how we remember him today. But we also remember and celebrate the journalism that Walter practiced. A standard of honesty and integrity and responsibility to which so many of you have committed your careers. It's a standard that's a little bit harder to find today.
Honesty, integrity, and responsibility. How about reporting that we were losing a war when all the information on the ground said we were winning the war? That's not honesty. That's revisionist history. But it gets worse.
We know that this is a difficult time for journalism. Even as appetites for news and information grow, newsrooms are closing. Despite the big stories of our era, serious journalists find themselves all too often without a beat. Just as the news cycle has shrunk, so has the bottom line. And too often we fill that void with instant commentary and celebrity gossip and the softer stories that Walter disdained rather than the hard news and investigative journalism he championed.
The reason the newsrooms are closing is the mental disorder called liberalism, a mental disorder that put Obama in power, in my opinion. But moving on. The conservatives are now the liberals. The liberals are now the conservatives. The world is turned upside down. Bob Dylan's song was really written for you, the town hallers. Listen to it. They are now the people in the trench coats. They are now the people spying on the people who oppose the government. The federal government is now filled with ex-pot-headed LSD types who have now become their worst enemy. So everything that the 60s stood for in many ways, the good things of it, let's put it to you that way, the libertarian side of it, the civil liberties side of it, is now being crushed by the Obamaites now that they have total power. And I knew it in the 60s who they were. I always knew the left were the fascists. I knew it every time I ran into them who they were. I knew them. I knew many of them in those days. And I dropped them like fleas on my body. I had to use like hair lice to get them out of my body. My whole life I had to get the lice out of my being. The lice of San Francisco that I unfortunately associated with. I was taught as a child if you lie down with lice, you're going to wake up lousy. It took me years to get the lice of San Francisco out of my hair. I'm a loner, I admit it. I don't have any friends. I'm alone. I have a dog and a family. What more does a man need? So I've been thinking about it. You know, we had a call from someone, a martial artist. We were talking about extreme exercise and how it's harmful. And a guy called and said he's a martial arts teacher, and he agrees with me that he teaches, you know, a different flow. And this is about gathering the energy fields and using it in the martial arts. And I said, I know what chi energy is because I use it on the radio. And he said, yes, you do. And I was thinking about that on the way into the studio today about where the heck does my chi energy come from? I mean, where does it come from? I don't even know. I honestly don't know. I was walking in the streets of San Francisco today, and I was thinking about it. I don't mean to be nice to put a halo on my head and say I get it from God. I don't know, maybe. Who knows? Sometimes I pray to God. I don't definitively go to a house of worship to pray to God. I ask God every day 6 to 7, 8 times a day to forgive me. That's all. Now, does that give me energy? I don't know. Maybe God knows that I truly mean it. There are people who go into temples and churches, and they try their best, but there's no sincerity in their heart, and I think God doesn't like insincere prayer. I think he likes sincere prayer, people who are genuinely understanding of how flawed they are. So, who knows? But then I don't think any of that really matters either. I don't know where my chi energy comes from. Maybe it's inborn. There's a study of twins. They did one study after another of twins. I'm not a twin. And some twins are separated at birth, and then they meet each other 30 years later. They find out every life phase of one twin is the same life phase of the other. They got married at the same age without knowing each other. They got divorced at the same age. They had turned. Everything was the same. Again, same profession, because it was encoded in their genetics. So I started to think, although I've been a self-willed person all my life, on a philosophical level, I'm starting to say, I don't know, maybe it's all genetically encoded. But I don't believe it, because I was almost dead in this earth many times. And I prayed for God to save me and give me a living. I told you that's how I got into radio, and I never stopped running since, because it came. See, I said to God, give me a living, because no matter what I did, I earned a PhD, I wrote 8 books, and I was still thrown onto the ash heap of history by liberalism. They would not hire a white male. Everywhere I turned, they said white males need not apply. We need only unqualified women and minorities in the positions, which is why the universities have become the low-life places that they are, basically houses of ill repute and of propaganda, except in very few departments. The universities today are worthless. You're better off becoming an electrician than you are becoming a professor. You'd be a more honest man if you were a purveyor of prostitutes than you would be as a professor of political science. That's my own personal bias. But why did I rise back up from the ashes? How did that happen? Well, I prayed, so here I am. But I also made a commitment, and the commitment was get rid of the lice that you know. Don't talk to them. Don't let them near you. They undermine you. They're jealous of you, and they are. None of them amounted to anything. I don't even mention their names. I knew many people in San Francisco who thought that they were writers, poets. No one ever heard of them. They were nothing. They were frauds. They were poseurs. You should have heard them walking around with the image that they had of themselves, who they were. The world was going to know them years later. Nothing. Busted suitcases. Zeros. Does it make them bad? Yes. It made them bad because unlike average people who don't assume that they're something great, these schmucks thought they were great. Makes them bad because they still deceive themselves into thinking they're good. Most progressives think that they're good. Don't you understand that? And the do-gooders will kill all of us because the road to you-know-where is paved with good intentions. Look out for the do-gooder, because he's the one who's going to slam the door on your face when you're put into a jail cell. He'll be the one doing it, not a right-winger. There are no right-wingers. The right was killed by George Bush. 8 years of George Bush destroyed the entire conservative movement and the entire right wing in this country. It's gone. It's dead. There is no enemy. So that's that. Moving on. Centerpiece is always medical care. Always health care. Always health care. Always health care. One of the first things Castro did after rounding up the people he fought with and putting them in prison, notice what I just said. After Fidel Castro, the lawyer, took over Cuba with his band of criminals, after arresting the men he fought with, some of them putting them in prison and shooting them because they were competitors to him and they didn't want a communist revolution, they wanted a true revolution, he was a gangster. So he shot the real revolutionaries, and the gangster Castro brothers took over Cuba. One of the first things Castro did was introduce universal health care. The reason I know this is because I once met a communist doctor in Hawaii who was obsessed with health care. And he was obsessed with it to the point of trying to sell everybody on how we needed universal health care. A single payer, universal health care. It's what all dictators do immediately. Now you say, well, why do they do that? Aren't they just Robin Hoods who want to give to the poor, take from the rich and give to the poor? No, it's a way of controlling you. If the government controls health care from cradle to grave, and there's only a certain amount of health care they can give out, they can control you. They can control you with the medication. They can control you with the doctoring. They can control you with the amount of visits. They can control you with the surgery you get or don't get. They can control you with the senior care or no care. And, more importantly, they own your medical records. Then the liberals have been obsessed with privacy for years, but they're not saying one word about a group of degenerate, evil communist left-wingers controlling your medical records, centralized bank of medical records. Your psychiatrist, your psychologist, your social worker, all private now, will fall into the hands of evil, degenerate terrorists who will control you. They will know everything about you. So if you liberals think that you're in favor of health care, universal health care, you better think twice. Because if you want everyone in the world to know what you tell your psychiatrist, you're on the road to exposure. Get it? Well, you better get it, because I know more about it than you do. I know more about it than you do, because you've been done like a Purdue chicken.
Michael Savage. Afternoons 3 to 7 on Talk 910 KNEW and online at 910KNEW.com.